All right, how you guys doing today? Today we getting into John chapter 6. First things first though, make sure you like the video, hit a little exit full screen, scroll a little bit, like it, full screen it back up. I recorded this twice, 2.5 times yesterday actually, because this chair has like a built-in back massager and like one of the pillows that you can plug in. So I plugged that into my computer, and when I started up my computer, I'm like, why is my keyboard and mouse not working? I got all the way through recording the video, realized my mic wasn't like plugged in right or something, recorded it a second time, mic wasn't plugged in right or something again, and I'm like, yo. And then I realized, oh, the back thing is probably overloading my computer with like things plugged into it. So I unplugged it and then just recorded the video you got yesterday, because I was like, I'm not reading this a third time. It's annoying me. And I wanted to record that video anyway. It wasn't like I had to scramble for an idea. It was like, all right, we'll just record this now rather than later. So update on my back. Took a rest day today, full on. I just took one of my friends out to lunch at this new Latino spot on campus. Very fire. Had a good time there. Rest day. Got a meeting with my boss in an hour, but we're doing good. Back's feeling decent. Back is feeling decent. One of the guys in my class was talking about how he tweaked his back as well, like throwing sandbags over his shoulder for like a workout, and he's like on week 7 and it's still hurting him. Mine was almost healed in 4 days, and then I just kind of Nonetheless, I digress. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far side of the shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw signs that he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw the great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves and gave thanks and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who has come into the world." Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into a boat and set off across the lake for Capernaum. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. The next day, the crowd that had stayed on the opposite shore of the lake realized that only one boat had been there, and that Jesus had not entered it with his disciples, but that they had gone away alone. Then some boats from Tiberias landed near the place where the people had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. Once the crowd realized that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into the boats and went to Capernaum in search of Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Jesus answered, "Very truly I tell you, you are looking for me not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. For on him God the Father has placed his seal of approval." Then they asked him, "What must we do to do the works God requires?" Jesus answered, "The work of God is this, to believe in the one who he has sent." So they asked him, "What sign then will you give that we may see it and believe you? What will you do?" "Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness. As it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." "Sir," they said, "always give us this bread." Then Jesus declared, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. But as I told you, you have seen me, and still you do not believe. All those the Father gives me will come to me, and whoever comes to me I will never drive away. For I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. And this is the will of him who has sent me, that I shall lose none of all those he has given me, but raise them up at the last day. For my Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day." At this, the Jews there began to grumble about him, because he said, "I am the bread that came down from heaven." They said, "Is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he now say, 'I came down from heaven'?" "Stop grumbling among yourselves," Jesus answered. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them, and I will raise them up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, they will all be taught by God. Everyone who has heard the Father and learned from him comes to me. No one has seen the Father except the one who is from God. Only he has seen the Father. Very truly I tell you, the one who believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, yet they died. But here is the bread that comes down from heaven, which anyone may eat and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. Then the Jews began to argue sharply among themselves. How can this man give us his flesh to eat? Jesus said to them, Very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me, and I in them. Just as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so the one who feeds on me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven. Your ancestors ate manna and died, but whoever feeds on this bread will live forever. He said this while teaching in the synagogue in Capernaum. On hearing this, many of his disciples said, This is a hard teaching. Who can accept it? Aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said to them, Does this offend you? Then what if you see the Son of Man ascend to where he was before? The Spirit gives life, the flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you, they are full of the Spirit and life. Yet there are some of you who do not believe. For Jesus had known from the beginning which of them did not believe and which would betray him. He went on to say, This is why I told you that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled them. From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. You do not want to leave too, do you? Jesus asked the 12. Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and to know that you were the Holy One of God. Then Jesus replied, Have I not chosen you, the 12? Yet one of you is a devil. He meant Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, who, though one of the 12, was later to betray him. I could start drinking that now. I could drink that now. Oh, they drink free. Anyway, so a lot of analogies here. We're told to believe, eat the flesh, believe, eat the flesh again, drink the blood. I think the main purpose here, this bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. This bread, so metaphorical living bread, is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. Giving bread, if I give you bread, what do? You eat it. Jesus is giving this bread for the life of the world. He's going to give the bread, his flesh, for the world. He died on the cross and rose again 3 days later. He gave the bread. His flesh was the bread. He gave it. He died. And then he resurrected and ascended into heaven. So he gave us his bread, right? He gave the bread to the world. Everybody in the world has their own choice if God draws them to Jesus to partake in this bread. Now, what does partaking in this bread look like? Believing. He died on the cross. He gave the bread to us. Now, obviously, we don't see that Jesus died. There were people at that moment who saw that Jesus died, and his disciples, God enabled them to believe, and he could see from the beginning who believed and who didn't. So, the fact that he gave the bread, but we didn't see it, we just have to believe that Jesus gave this bread to us. And to partake in this bread is to follow him. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. And this goes back to the living water example. The water he gives that is living will cause somebody to never thirst again. And just as the living Father has sent me, and I live because of the Father, so the one who feeds on me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven. Jesus came down from heaven. This is the bread that the Father has given us. So the one who feeds on me will live because of me. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Why? Because whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life. You will live forever. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me, and I in them. So the one who feeds on me will live because of me. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. So the one who feeds on me will live because of me. So if you believe in Jesus and come to him, you will never go hungry. You will never go thirsty. And this is the act of feeding on him. He gave us the bread. How do we get the bread? We follow him. We go to him to collect the bread. He gave the bread to the world. How do we get this bread? we go to him. Because who is the bread? He is the bread. So if he gave the bread to the world, how do we get the bread? We follow him. We go to him. If I put this pen over here and I say, go get the pen, how do you get the pen? You follow where the pen is going and collect the pen. But in order to collect the pen, not only do you have to be shown the pen, as God shows people himself and Jesus, because if you're not shown that pen, you're going to be going off getting a different pen. This is the pen you should be looking for. Whole time, you're out there looking for this one, which, very two different pens, right? You have to be shown the pen and believe in the pen. Because if I go and I put the pen down and there's no belief, you don't believe that the pen is over there, how are you going to go follow it, right? If I go put it down and you don't believe in the pen, what's going to go entreat you to follow it? Nothing, because you don't believe in the pen. You're going to say, why would I go over there if there's no pen and I need a pen, right? But if you believe in the pen and don't follow the pen, what good does that get you? You need the pen, but you're not following the pen. You're not going where the pen went. Therefore, you can't receive the pen and access what the pen has to offer. But if you're shown the pen and you believe that the pen was given to you and placed in your grasp, you follow the pen, you go get the pen, and you have access to what the pen has to offer. And that is this analogy. It's not literally saying you got to go find his body and eat it, because you can't, because it's up there. But you have to follow where he went. And even in a literal sense, if you want to follow where he went, you have to go to heaven. How do you go to heaven? Believe on his name and walk in the light as he is the light. And if you don't believe in the pen, one, you can't follow the pen. Or if you end up following the pen, you're not going to get what the pen can offer. You're not going to ever collect the pen and be able to write with the pen. But if you believe in the pen, you can go follow the pen and go retrieve it. Mic drop. I'm still going to look up a sermon though, just because I want to see. I feel like some pastors have some funny takes about whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me and I in them. Because I feel like they're going to make some funny like cannibalism jokes. Like, Jesus isn't actually telling us to eat his body. I just want to see that. And I would say this is probably my favorite chapter so far. Just because that pen example, that made me happy to think of something like that. The way I could like, now maybe it's because I've read this chapter 3.5 times now, but being able to see it and understand it is pretty fire to me and my walk. All right, that's going to be the end of the chapter. Hope you guys have yourselves a fantastic rest of your day. Peace.